Hey geeks, welcome to another episode of 256 Seconds with dotNetDave. I'm Dave McCarter and I'm glad you're back. I also hope you're all staying safe out there in the global pandemic that we're all dealing with right now. So in this episode, I wanted to talk about an article that I wrote about 4 years ago about my workflow before I check in any code in any project that I'm on. I did this video to add to the article to show you exactly what I do before I check in code. I've used this workflow for a long time and it's really helped me checking in really great code that runs really well, doesn't really have too many bugs, and therefore I don't get too many or sometimes any tickets from the quality assurance team. And that's my goal. You know, I want to work on features, not bugs. Let's get into it. So the first thing I do is I run StyleCop. StyleCop has been around since the beginning of .NET, originally internally with the Microsoft Teams. And the reason they wrote it was, you know, they wanted all the .NET framework code to look like it's written by the same person. And that's a really good goal to have, because then anybody can look at the code and easily understand it without a lot of time and expense. And if you look at the .NET framework code, that's exactly what you see. It's not as true for the .NET Core. Since it's open source, there's not as much documentation in the .NET Core code. I hope the .NET Core team watches this video and follows my own workflow. You're an open source developer or use open source code, it should be documented just as much as any other code. So there's a couple things I do before I run StyleCop. The first one is to make sure the document is formatted. And to do that, you can just use a keystroke in Visual Studio. The keystroke is Control-KD. So when you run that, you can see it properly formats the spacing and all those kind of things throughout the entire class. So do that first. The next thing I do is I order the methods and properties in my class the way StyleCop wants it. There's a specific order to where things should be placed in your class. Can I remember all those things? No, I can't. So I use an add-in. And with this add-in, which I think is CodeItWrite by DevExpress, I can just go to the class, click on that, and then I can say organize members. And as soon as I do that, it's going to organize all the methods and properties the way StyleCop wants it. And that's what I want, because I don't want, you know, violations from StyleCop just because of that. So now it's time to run StyleCop. You can, after you install it, you can just right mouse click on the class and say run StyleCop. So you can see here all the violations that StyleCop found. Some about using directives, which I ignore that one. Curly brackets, things like that. The one I want to show you is down here, and it's this right here. And what's it saying is there should be an XML comment for this public property, and that's completely true. This is very important for IntelliSense, and so other developers know exactly what this method does, what exceptions it throws, things like that. So it's very important to document all your public methods. You should document all of them, but at least the public protected ones. So to document it, lots of people just do the three slashes like that, then type in the description and the returns and things like that. Since I like to do things the easy way, I use an extension called GhostDoc from submain.com. GhostDoc has been around for a long time. There's a free version. It will always be a free version. And if you follow proper naming standards, it will actually write the documentation for you. It's pretty cool. Watch. I can do Control-KD, which won't work because Camtasia is taking over that keystroke. So I can go up to the icon up here and say document this, and boom, documentation is pretty much done. I do want to edit it a little bit. I want to take this out and I want to capitalize AES. I'm all done. So that's StyleCop. You know, StyleCop checks for mostly documentation, where things are, blank lines, you know, incorrect curly brackets, things like this. This is all something that's important for perception. You know, you want your code to look good because that reflects back on you. If it's messy, not formatted correctly, misspelled words, even worse, misspelled method names and property names, that's going to come back on you. So you want to make sure the perception of your code is really good. And StyleCop really helps you to do that, along with GhostDoc, which will write the documentation for you. My next step is I run an extension called CodeItWrite from submain.com. CodeItWrite, again, has been around for a long time. And CodeItWrite is a static code analysis tool. It can actually do analysis on code that doesn't even build, which I've tested and it does work. It actually checks for the same rules as Analyze in Visual Studio, which I'm going to show you next. But the coolest thing is most of those things you can click a button and CodeItWrite will fix it for you. And not only fix it for you, but do it with the correct pattern. Running CodeItWrite is really easy. I can right mouse click on the class and do Analyze File if I just want to check the class. And I can also do review code, and I can do the entire solution or a separate project. So let me do the solution and show you what it looks like. So this is the CodeItWrite report summary. And in this solution, it found 45 errors. A lot of these are actually false positives because CodeItWrite works really well in .NET Framework, but still needs to do some work to get the .NET Core analysis to work 100%. So this is a report of the violations. I want to show you one that I actually haven't seen in this code before. And it's basically saying include instance fields in the serialization, deserialization process. And I can double click on it and go to where it's telling me to do that. And I have an XML ignore attribute here, but I guess I'm missing something else. If I go back to the report, you can see here, I can actually correct this by just clicking a button. And in this case, I have a couple choices. So I can do add it to the serialization process or add the non-serialized attribute to the field. So let's do that. Then I do correct. It fixes it for you. And then I go back, not only to see what it did, but also to make sure it's correct. So like I said, 90% of what CodeItWrite finds, even more, you just click a button. And it saves so much time, it will pay for itself the first time you use it. The next step is to run Analyze in Visual Studio. Analyze has been around for a while now in the .NET Framework and has worked really well in .NET Framework. It's just brand new to .NET Core, and I think there's still some kinks they need to work out. So while it works in .NET Core, it's definitely doesn't work as well as the version of .NET Framework. So in .NET Core projects, you can go to Properties and go to Code Analysis and make sure Run on Build is checked. This is really important because you want to fix violations after every time you build, because that's very, very cheap to fix an issue. Whereas if a user finds it, it's going to be over 150 times the cost to fix the issue. So this should be done while you're coding, not 6 months or a year later. And in .NET Core, you'll have to install the analyzers too. But make sure Run on Build is checked in all of your projects. And the first time you do that, you might get a lot of violations, but just keep it on and keep fixing them when you have time. In the open source project I was showing you earlier, there's not a lot of violations I can show you from Analyze, so I'm going to show you in my application that I've written for .NET developer. And it works pretty much the same way. You set Run on Build, and then to run Analyze, you do build. And the better way to run it is really to rebuild solution, and that will rebuild everything and run the analysis after the build. There's not a lot of violations in the open source project of mine that I was showing you earlier, so I'm going to show you my application that I've written for .NET developers and run Analyze on that. And in .NET Framework, it's pretty much the same thing. You do Run on Build, you pick your rule set, and then every time you build, it'll analyze the code afterward. When the analysis is done, it'll show up in errors, warnings, and messages. As you can see, I don't have any errors. Those should always be the number one thing you should fix. Number two, of course, warnings, and then number three, messages as soon as you have time. But at least do errors and warnings. Kind of like CodeItWrite, it'll show you the violation, where it is, the category, which I use all the time. And over here, it'll actually, if you click on this, it'll actually take you to the help page on the document site at Microsoft to tell you how you can fix it. And usually the help pages show you the wrong way to do it and the right way to fix it. And then once you learn, then you go back and fix it. So in this violation, it's actually complaining that I'm using lowercase dot in my namespace, but that's my website address. So, when you get violations like this, you can just right mouse click on it, say suppress in suppression file, and now you'll never get that violation again because I've said, okay, that's okay. One of the other violations it's showing me is that I'm passing a literal string as a parameter value. And this is the issue right here where I'm using string format. I have some text right here. While this is fine coding, the problem is, this won't work with different languages. So again, fixing these globalization issues right while you're coding is far cheaper than doing it later. I've been on many globalization projects. They're always painful. They always take way too much time, and they're very expensive. So if you just fix it every time you build, it's very, very, very cheap. So to fix this, you really need to move the string into the resource file. You can do that manually. I like to do things the easy way, so I use an extension, CodeItWrite from DevExpress, and I select extract string to resource, put it into the resources file, and then I can rename this any way I want. I really don't like the XO added to the end, so I just do that, press return, and I'm all done. So a few of the things I'm showing you today, I'm using CodeItWrite from DevExpress extensions. And I just want to let you know that if you buy my latest coding standards book up on Amazon.com, you can get a free copy of CodeItWrite. So if you don't have CodeItWrite, please go get it and by purchasing my book. It's a lot cheaper if you purchase my book than buy it. Now that you've done StyleCop, CodeItWrite, and analyze, the next step now before you check in is to run a unit test. Hopefully your projects have unit tests. If they don't, better start working on them quick so you'll be more confident about the code you push up to production. When I run my unit test, I usually use the test runner part of CodeItWrite because it actually can run the unit test faster. In some projects I've been on, it can run it up to twice as fast. And when you have a project that takes almost an hour to run the unit test, that's a big savings in time. So I'm just going to run the unit test. So test runner ran my unit tests. They took almost 17 seconds. And as you can see, I've got something going on in my IO tests. So I need to go figure that out. So once I fix those, then I commit the code up into the repository. Then the next step, and I usually do this at the end of a sprint or a big feature before I check in the code. And that is to run a memory profiler. All the tools I've shown you and all the tools I've tried, none of them will catch everything. The only way to find the last little bit of issues in your code, including performance and memory problems, is to use a memory profiler. So the one that I use is the .NET memory profiler from Cytec Software. Tried all the major profilers out there. This is the one I like the best. It has all the bells and whistles I like, and it's not that expensive. So make sure you run a memory profiler on code that's running as near to production as you can, right? You don't really want to use your development machine unless there's no other option. You don't really want to use dev machines unless there's no other option. You really want to do it on a near production machine with production code. In some projects I've been on, I haven't had access to run it on production like that. So I went down to plan B and actually plan C or D maybe, and that is to actually run the memory profiler against the unit test. That's the only choice I had. So it did help me find issues. Not as good as I really wanted, but it was something. And the .NET Memory Profiler can profile any application you have, ASP.NET and NEXE, even EXEs you don't have the source code to. it can check anything you want. And also it can go across to a server and check on the server from your machine. So there's lots of options to this, and it's really useful. I must warn you that it takes a lot of time to go over the results. And I also should say that not everybody in the team needs this. It's usually a senior level person who really understands not only coding, but how memory works and performance and things like that. They're the ones that need this, not everybody in the team. This is an example of what the screen looks like while you're running the memory profiling. You can see what's happening with the memory. You can see when the garbage collections happen, and lots of other things. I like to watch this just in case it's really going bad and I just want to stop everything and go back and look at the current results. After it's done, it'll show you this report up here. It's kind of collapsed, but it'll show you all the issues that it found. And you can actually see what's going on with all the resources and the memory and the bytes and all those things. And once you find something you want to look at, you can actually drill down on the issue itself. And this is what the drill down looks like. And you can look and see exactly where the issue is happening all the way up the call stack. I've even found things in the .NET framework that were having issues that I've reported to the team. So this is where I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what are issues I can really fix, and then look at the issue itself. There's a really cool feature of .NET Memory Profiler that will also capture all the values in the object, so you can look at the values. That, of course, takes a lot more CPU to do that, but it can do that, and it's really helpful when you're trying to track down, why something might be happening because of the values inside the object. So that's memory profiling. I hope you do it. Unfortunately, on all the teams I've worked on, I think in my entire programming career, I'm the only one that's done this. So please do this. Next time I ask this in a conference session, I would want to see more hands go up than mine. So please do memory profiling on your apps before they go into production, not after release. I've seen that happen too. So there you have it. That's my workflow before I check in any code on any project I work on. It's important for me to do that because I'm a contractor. I want to make sure all the code I submit looks the best, runs the best, because when I leave that contract someday, I don't want them blaming everything on me. So thanks for watching another episode of 256 Seconds with .NET Dave. I'll see you next time.